Next is ordinance 20-09062022, amending the zoning district T-4.2B. This is a public hearing and first reading. Do I have a motion?
Motion to move.
Second.
Motion from Councilor Walker, second from Councilor Staples. I'd like to ask Mr. Eric Cousins. Oh, there you are. I'm looking all over for you. You're hiding. I'd like to ask Mr. Eric Cousins, before we open up to the public hearing at this point, and
Catherine Cook.
Catherine, thanks.
Okay.
Catherine, I didn't want to forget you, but I did. So just to give a brief presentation, I just want to make sure there's a lot of questions probably from the public that if you could go through your story mapping and the new FAQs, tell us where it lives, and just kind of give us that overview and pick out some of the highlight FAQs. I'll let you drive it, take as much time as you need, make it bigger though. Oh yeah, okay. And this is just, I'll let you go through it, but I want to make sure that, this clears up, and I've reviewed this, clears up a lot of ambiguity and questions that the people in the public might have. So hopefully Councilor Gary,
It's emergency.
could you please just step out to the side, please? Yes. Thank you. Out of the room, thank you very much. So that way we can see this, so that we can actually, maybe hopefully have people's questions answered before they ask them. Go for it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Appreciate the opportunity to kind of walk through what we'll be presenting to Planning Board next Tuesday. We've spent a long period of time, a lot of public discussions, working towards the draft that became the T-4.2B zoning district, and now we enter into the official public process for you to hold public hearings, Planning Board to hold public hearings, and then back to you for a second reading to actually consider a final adoption of a text that both you and the Planning Board have worked to develop over the last several months to year. We did not intend to go through the exact text of the T-4.2B zoning district, but it is available in your packet. It's been available on the Planning Board site for their agenda for next Tuesday for a couple of weeks now. And also the official zoning map that's being proposed is also available in the council packet, as well as the Planning Board packet. Our goal with this story map was to answer some frequently asked questions, as you mentioned, talk a little bit about what a form-based code is and why you might use it for this type of regulation, and then talk about some of the differences between this and the current zoning. A form-based code is a land development regulation that focuses on the built results in high-quality public realm, so how the buildings, how the structures that are constructed form the public realm and the edges of the street, as well as other public spaces. This type of recommendation is supported by the city's comprehensive plan. It has been supported since the 2010 comprehensive plan in certain areas of the city, and the 2021 comprehensive plan really extended that. The Planning Board had talked about extending this earlier on when we adopted it in many other areas, the urban areas of the city previously, and there was a recognition that it might be too much, too fast at that time, and they really looked to establish it, test it, and then look to expand it to other areas. The form-based code focuses less on uses and more on the built form. So it does allow for more flexibility in how you use the insides of buildings if you meet the character and the form designated by the code. That includes multifamily housing, where traditionally we may have limited it to 1- and 2-family homes, as well as commercial uses on properties that also contain a dwelling unit. The purpose of applying the new zoning to Auburn City Core, as we scroll down, we tried to break this down into the primary reasons that we've heard through the comprehensive plan adoption process, as well as the zoning discussions and feedback from the public. This is part of the designated growth area in the comprehensive plan. It's been designated as an area that has utilities and infrastructure that can support additional growth. The changes to T-4.2B from the urban residential zone does increase the opportunity for new housing. That's really been a primary driver based on the comp plan in proposing this type of zoning for the area, and one that we really can't achieve without including the allowance for multifamily housing. It allows for a wider variety of housing, including multifamilies, encourages walkability, creates business opportunity. It expands the opportunity for somebody to operate a business out of their residential property. The infrastructure already exists, so where this density is being proposed is at the urban core or near the urban core of the city where water and sewer and other utilities are available or can fairly easily be extended to carry that urban form a little bit further out from where it has developed on its own. In large part being limited by existing zoning that hasn't allowed that more traditional density to expand to larger areas. Concentrated services, amenities, activities, and necessities. By concentrating growth in this area that already has utilities, it really does increase the opportunity for investment in an individual pedestrian infrastructure improvements, more people walking, vehicles going slower because there's more pedestrian activity, and can promote that. FAQs, one that we had a lot of calls on. We've fielded hundreds of calls over the last several months, as well as just since the last notice went out. How will it affect my neighborhood? We have a map below that we'll scroll down to, but that really breaks down the lot size of parcels within that zoning district. So more than half of the parcels within this area, almost 55%, would not support more than a 4-unit building, even under the proposed zoning. Many of those are occupied by an existing single family or multiple units, and there may not even be a desire for the owner to pursue those. So really we'll be limited for infill in those areas. Almost 80% of the lots within that area would not support more than 8 units. So there's relatively few larger lots that would support larger multifamily development within that area. Over 80% of the parcels, or right around 80%, if you could scroll up just a little bit, 79.4% of the parcels would not support more than 8 units within that area. Now that's the number of parcels, not the total acres. So as you might imagine, the larger parcels as you move out of the built urban core support more of the larger, potentially larger multifamily housing developments. But they're relatively few in the total parcel makeup. So of the parcels over 5 acres in area, those parcels make up 571 plus or minus acres. 26% of that is schools, existing parks, existing condos. So there's really about 390 acres of land on parcels over 5 acres that could really support those larger multifamily developments within a total area of 1,600 plus acres within the form-based T-4.2B proposed area.
So basically what you're saying is the vast majority of the land that's already as-built environment cannot support or justify any type of, well, basically units over 8 units per acre.
So yeah, mostly infill, adding a unit within a building. And we give the full breakdown on this chart of all the different parcel sizes, and you can dig down into that in more detail. But yeah, almost 80% would not support more than 8 units, and only about 54% would support 4 or fewer units. The largest parcels are split between the proposed T-4.2B form-based code area and other zones, and largely owned by a single property owner. Tim Corporation is the largest holder of land within that area. Existing form in the Court Street area, we had a lot of people asking, well, how do I visualize what that density looks like? If you look at Hazel Street, very familiar with this section of street, I used to live across the street. You can see images of the actual buildings in that stretch of roadway. That is 19.5 units per acre, so nearly 20 units per acre, more than the form-based code intends to achieve. Another example, the corner of Jocelyn Street and Court Street and Granite Street in that block. Those buildings, they're familiar to a lot of people. That block shown at the right-hand side of the screen totals 16.9 units per acre. So there's a lot of existing development in the urban core. I know people tend to think if it allows 16 units per acre, you're talking 16-unit buildings, but I think one of the greatest benefits to providing units in this area with this form-based code is more of the infill and allowing for a 2 or a 3 unit where a single was allowed before. And we have a lot of that existing within the area. Next example, Shepley Street near Hillcrest. There's only one multifamily in this group of homes in the block. The rest are single families, but still averaging 13.5 units per acre. So that type of character, smaller lots, singles mixed with 2s, 3s, 4s, potentially, with larger lot sizes required for parking and green space and to meet the lot coverage standards for multifamily buildings. We've traditionally allowed 35 feet in height, so we've traditionally allowed 3-story buildings in these zones, but there just hasn't been much of an incentive to do that for 1- and 2-family homes. This is a good example of where T-4.2 zoning has been in place for a few years now. And the density there is higher than what the T-4.2B aims to achieve. It's 19.3 acres, almost 20 units per acre. But we really put this in not as an example of something that exists within the proposed T-4.2B, but what we're seeing where we already have T-4.2, the building on your left has a brand new front porch. That front porch is larger than the one that was there before, and it wasn't allowed when before we had the form-based code zoning that reduced the front setbacks. And we are seeing additional units created within buildings, and we're seeing where somebody, to preserve a front porch on the front of that building before, would have to piecemeal it in repairs in less than 50% of the structural members at any given year. We're seeing complete replacements, and I think a really positive improvement in the image of that historic building by having that brand new front porch in a larger setting. One of the questions we had repeatedly was the code allows a mix of uses and businesses. What does this mean? What can I expect? Heathco's is a neighborhood store that I think a lot of people associate with their neighborhood identity. I've heard people refer to themselves as living in the Heathco's neighborhood. That property is non-conforming from the T-4.2B standards in the sense that it has a commercial use without a residential use. T-4.2 would allow for adding residential uses to it, but it would also allow for people to create new business uses like that on corridors or corners or in neighborhoods, but they're much more likely to be on corner lots or near arterials in order to have the traffic to really support a business, other than starting a very small business that's more destination-based in somebody's home. Traffic was a big concern, part of the frequently asked questions. Traffic came up a number of times. Increasing density will allow for better pedestrian improvements, crosswalk maintenance, striping, improvements to crossings. If more people are living there, there's higher property values. It does open up the opportunity to reinvest in improving pedestrian infrastructure, as well as we've seen with the Grace Lawn apartments, Washington Street apartments proposed at Brickyard Circle, as well as, trying to think of the other example that we talked about today. Do you recall which one that was?
Convenient MD, maybe? Well, that's not the...
Yeah, it allows us to, Convenient MD on Center Street. It allows us to work with the developer, identify deficiencies in surrounding infrastructure, and if their development is creating more foot traffic, more vehicular traffic that exacerbates that deficiency, we're able to push for that to be included as part of a project. So new investment, new proposed housing does allow us to do that, especially at 3 or more units when we go to planning board for subdivision. It does create density at the urban core, which makes it more likely, more feasible to have enough riders to promote a better public transit system over time. None of this happens overnight, but over time, that's a goal that was identified as part of the comp plan effort. Walking, riding, and biking to school. These are rough guesstimates on the walking distance surrounding each neighborhood school as well as the high school. With the black outline showing the outline of the T-4.2 district, you can see that the vast majority of this area is within walking distance, not requiring bus service to neighborhood schools as well as the high school. If we're going to grow somewhere, I think for those reasons, the existing infrastructure, proximity to schools, it makes a lot more sense to grow here than just evenly spreading that growth over the entirety of our 67 square miles. More units will mean more kids that we'll have to educate. While that's true, that more housing does mean more residents, and it does mean some additional kids, we've met with Dr. Brown recently to update our numbers on school projections, and we've really seen stagnant or declining school enrollment over the last number of years. Fairview School in particular can absorb another 100 students. Walton could absorb as many as 150, and overall, district-wide, 500 to 600 more students. And that's even after we've absorbed the students from the many multifamily developments that we've already seen come online in the last couple of years. We've seen preschools close or reduce their hours. The school district is really struggling to attract and retain educators and staff. Phil mentioned the struggles that the city's having with that. A big part of that is available housing. The monthly house payment that's recommended for a person based on their income is not to exceed 28% of the household income. We've looked at some numbers for actual sales in Auburn. The entry-level pay for a teacher is $42,000. A firefighter at $45,000 plus potential OT brings them up to $55,000, and a police officer with overtime at $65,000. The average price of an existing entry-level home, and these are based on real sales in Auburn over the last couple of years, an entry-level existing home, $267,500, a new home, $318,000. Based on the recommendation that a person not obligate more than 28% of their income to their mortgage and housing expenses, people need to make $87,400 a year to afford an existing home, and $104,600 a year to afford a new home in Auburn. And the income required to purchase an existing home comes out to about 140% of median income, and 204% in order to buy a new home or to build a new home in Auburn. It's really not feasible for somebody as a teacher, firefighter couple to buy a home in Auburn currently, and that's something that increasing supply can help with. Auburn superintendent said that approximately 90% of teachers' resignations are the result of a teacher finding a school closer to home. It's hard for people to move into a new home given the prices, and they're typically moving to be closer to where they live. Increasing the housing stock here, I think, can help provide more teachers, public servants, firefighters, police officers, and other staff that's needed to provide services. Prices of homes are high and continue to increase. The cost of buying or building a home is prohibitive. I think we've covered that. Many people want to live in Auburn, but can't afford to. Traditional zoning tends to be exclusionary. We've had 1- and 2-family zoning at the core of our city for decades at this point, and really haven't seen new multifamily development in those areas.
Or much single family, correct, to be fair. I mean, just because exclusionary, it's not just excluding multifamily, it's excluding single family, correct?
It's really limited production of all types of housing. The purpose of implementing form-based code is to create more walkable neighborhoods. Part of that is allowing for the density that allows the city to invest in and maintain higher quality pedestrian infrastructure because there's more people sharing it. Multifamily housing is outlawed in about 75% of the country. So it's not unique to Auburn, but I know Auburn is considering doing something about it, especially where we have utilities available. This is an alternative. The form-based code is alternative to conventional zoning. And it really can help to address the walkability, the supply issues, and to help us grow in a more compact fashion, reducing the pressure for growing into rural areas. We do have LD 2003 to think about that will allow for 4-unit buildings anywhere where single-family housing is allowed, either within a growth area or where city sewer is available. They're still fleshing out the details as far as the rulemaking process. One of the other things that LD 2003 allows for that a couple people have brought up is if we have a prescriptive density standard like we do for the urban residential zoning district, affordable units will be allowed to exceed that by a multiplier of 2.5 times. So we're already talking 15 affordable units per acre if you apply that to the urban residential zoning standard that exists, but it creates an unfairness that doesn't allow that density for market rate units. And I think we've said we want all types of housing. I think the form-based code without a prescriptive exact density standard relying on form equals that out, so affordable units have the same incentive to be built as market rate units. This is our growth area map in the comp plan. You can see that the entirety of the proposed T-4.2 is within that growth area. And current zoning shows the urban residential zoning within that area. And then I think there's one more image, or is that the end of it?
There are a few more that just demonstrate how LD 2003 could impact a lot in Auburn, which I can walk through. Sure. So just to get an example of what LD 2003 could do based on the text, granted the language and the rulemaking has not been established yet. It has not gone into effect. So some of these things might change as the state considers how they might apply to municipalities. But just to get an idea of what the density could look like in this urban residential zone, which is proposed to be T-4.2B, we picked a standard lot. It's where this, just so people have an idea of where it's located, it's where this pin mark is, where I'm circling with my cursor. This is the lot that it is. It is originally one lot. If you scroll, I'm gonna show that there's an existing house on it. This is one lot altogether. Following the setbacks and the dimensional requirements of the urban residential zone, I took the liberty to divide it into 2 more lots here. All of these lots are conforming with urban residential zoning. LD 2003 says that in the designated growth area of the city, up to 4 units could be allowed, and that is how we read the text. So seeing that, so you can see here with the setbacks, you could put 4 small homes. This is just a rough rendering of what would be allowed in LD 2003 under the current text. These are meant to be duplexes. These 2, the bottom left hand rectangular buildings. So, and then on the right is an existing home. And LD 2003 also says that up to 2 homes can be placed on a lot that already has an existing home. It could either be one additional unit that's attached to the existing building, or one that is not attached, or you could do one of each. So here, to assume the maximum, I drew one of each here. This area is, this area is about a half an acre here. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, okay, sorry, this area is about a half an acre. Altogether, it comes out to be about 16 units an acre. If you consider what LD 2003 in urban residential could do. So really, this proposal is not, it doesn't go very far outside the current layout of these neighborhoods, and this kind of infill would likely happen with the upcoming legislation. This is an example of what it could look like, and this would be a conforming piece.
But Catherine, I'm sorry, if with LD 2003,
Mm-hmm.
with the older existing zoning of urban residential,
Yes.
not form-based code, but the
Right.
current now, because it's been repealed, 4.2B2 was repealed, instead of 16, they could actually go 40 units in that 1 acre lot.
Yes.
If it was affordable. The quote-unquote subsidized housing is 2.5 times the allotted density, correct?
Yes, but I'm assuming that this is just market rate.
Okay, but if it wasn't,
If it wasn't, if
under
this was
urban residential,
affordable,
what could that be?
if it was for affordable, it could,
It's 24.
yes, yeah.
24 units. So instead of 16 units under 4.2B, it could be 24 units with LD 2003 applied to urban residential, 2.5 times the existing stated zoning.
You could interpret it that? You could interpret it that way. I think we're still trying to figure out exactly how that LD 2003 allowance, the different allowances, like for 4 units per parcel, will interact with the density.
Right, but I mean, so if a developer came, the whole point of 2003 was, if a developer came and said, I want to put 2.5 times your stated density on a 1 acre lot, they can.
Yeah, 2.5 times for the urban res would be 15 units, but then you have those other provisions, like the 4 units, that we don't know exactly how that math is going to work out when you combine
Right.
how those two different regulations impact the use of that land.
Right.
Hopefully, rulemaking will make that clear.
Right, so without all that being defined, this, by the text, this kind of interpretation, I read it as being allowed here, which would be comparable to LD 2003, which would be comparable to the density under T-4.2B. What T-4.2B would do, though, would be to help in advance to erase nonconformity and create opportunity for existing lots. So having a nonconforming residence or building may make it harder to obtain permits for improving or upgrading a home. Several of these lots here, all of these marked in red, are currently non-conforming, which means they are under the conforming lot size, which is either 10,000 square feet for a single-family residence or 12,000 square feet for a two-family residence. If your lot is non-conforming, you have a much lower chance of being able to obtain permits for things like making that porch improvement or adding any kind of additional living space for maybe an in-law or an adult child or an elderly parent. So what T-4.2B would do would help us perhaps get out ahead of LD 2003, decrease the setbacks, allow for some of that flexibility in different housing types, upgrades, which is currently not allowed, very hard for a current homeowner to do. There are about 625 non-conforming parcels in this area based on acreage. There are other factors that can make a parcel non-conforming as well, like frontage or setbacks. So all of this red area up here just shows parcels that are non-conforming based on the parcel size. But many of these buildings down here are built really close to the street. All of these buildings on Summer Street here are currently non-conforming, which seriously limits their opportunity to make upgrades or adjustments to these homes. So urban residential, just as a refresher, has a 25-foot setback requirement. That means that any adjustment cannot make any of these buildings more non-conforming, meaning you can't build any closer to the road than it already is. And any new building that goes in under current urban residential zoning needs to be 25 feet back, which does not fit into the aesthetic of this neighborhood at least. So, for example, Summer, Winter, Turner Streets have 100% non-conformance on the basis of front setbacks. T-4.2B zoning would bring this area and others into conformity. So here's just an example. All these setbacks show, I know it's kind of hard to see, that these are all non-conforming setbacks. And for the public who wants to see this better, this will be made available on the website. You'll be able to easily scroll through it, enlarge it, and that will be available for your information.
So you
And
can zoom into your own home, if you live in that area.
yep, yeah, you can. If you go onto the, not on this map here, but if you go onto this map over here, yeah, you can, the bigger maps, you will be able to zoom into your home and see if you're not conforming or conforming. That might be of interest to you.
And we'll be finalizing those as we approach the planning board meeting next Tuesday. We'll get a version online.
And that's when you're going to get the version online once you finalize it. So
Yep.
this is a preview, non-public
Yes.
or non-published. Yeah.
Right. And also, if anybody has questions specifically about their home, or if they want any more information about how this might affect them, you can always give us a call at the planning office anytime. We talk to people through these items every day, and I think we're often able to answer questions and clear up some confusions. So please don't hesitate if you have any questions or have a hard time navigating this map.
And if you have any difficulty getting to City Hall, we've had a number of people call and say, it's really hard for me to get down there. We're happy to go meet you at your house and explain exactly how the current zoning applies versus the proposed T-4.2B.
Thank you. And thank you very much. I know that was a little unorthodox per se, but I really wanted everybody to see this. If you could just stay there just in case the council has any further questions upon our deliberation. But I will invite the public. This is a public hearing, excuse me. If there's any members of the public that would like to speak, if so, please step up to the podium, say your name, address, and your comments